And good evening, I'm Errol Laborde. Marcia is on assignment tonight. If you're going out drinking in Jefferson Parish tonight, there are temporarily fewer places that will be able to serve you. We'll examine why. Though the restaurants may be dry, the streets to get to them are drenched. We'll look at how much drainage has improved. We'll also examine the latest in the Irvin Mayfield investigation, a vote on short-term rentals, questions of free speech in Terrebonne Parish, a price put on the former Six Flags site, and the search for a coastal management czar. At the bar for us are tonight's Informed Sources, Ramon Antonio Vargas, reporter for the New Orleans Advocate, David Hammer, reporter for WWL-TV Channel 4, Dawn Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Catherine Sayer, reporter for NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. Catherine, we'll go to you first. There are a lot of different plans out there involving renting property in various forms to tourists or temporary visitors. There was some action this week taken by the City Planning Commission. You want to just separate one from the other and what people are looking at?
Sure. So when we talk about short-term rentals, we're talking about when people put their own homes up for rent to tourists and visitors on websites like Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway. And there's an estimated 3,800 to 5,000 properties listed on these websites in New Orleans, despite the fact that it is illegal here to rent your house for less than 30 days. So the city's trying to figure out what to do. Obviously, it's an issue. The city's trying to figure out whether to go ahead and legalize and then have the enforcement and rules and regulations, or to keep them illegal. And so the City Planning Commission considered the proposal on Tuesday, and they kind of took a moderate approach. They said it's okay if you rent your house out for up to 30 days in a year. So you could rent out your house during Jazz Fest or Mardi Gras when you want to get out of town and go to the beach. You can rent out spare bedrooms, or if you live in a shotgun double, you could rent out the other half. That's as long as you live in the property that you're renting. But the most controversial kind of short-term rental is when you rent out your whole house, your whole property, and you're not there. So that is the type of short-term rental that the City Planning Commission Tuesday said, no, we're not going to have that. We're not going to recommend that that be legalized.
How do they enforce this? I mean, how do they keep track of whether you're doing it 30 days in a year or in a month? I mean, how do they even track that? So
enforcement is still a big question, however this plays out. And I think that's going to require a whole separate ordinance that's going to go through the City Council on its own. What happened this week is really focused on a zoning amendment to the city's comprehensive zoning ordinance. But that's a huge question. All the categories would have to get a license through the city, so they would be tracked in that way. The whole home rentals, the kind of rental where you're not living there, they were going to require that type of rental to go through a much more arduous process to get approval from the city, as well as pay some higher fees to make it and then as well as restricting the density, so allowing only 2 per block face or 4 per block.
Now, the concern, people who are opposed to these type of rentals, is that increasingly blocks will be not places where families live, but where people are renting out homes for short term, so you don't have any real residential base developing there.
Absolutely. That's one of the main concerns from opponents of legalization, and it was one of the main concerns that came from the City Planning Commission on Tuesday. I mean, they were unanimous in this decision. They clearly had concerns about what it will do to home affordability by taking long-term rentals off the market. Just the life and culture of neighborhoods, welcoming tourists into all parts of the city, and displacing potentially long-term residents. On the other side, there's an alliance of short-term rental owners who say, hey, we're here. Let's get the enforcement. We want to follow the rules. We can get rid of the bad actors and get the city some money. Because right now, the ban is not being enforced, obviously. The city does not have the resources to enforce the ban as it stands.
I hear a lot of people from here who will go to Europe, to Rome or Paris, and they'll say, man, we had a great deal. We rented this apartment for 2 weeks, and it was a great apartment. It was a lot cheaper than the hotel. So you see it happening all over the world now.
All over the world, and cities in the U.S. are handling it differently. I mean, statewide in New York, it's illegal to rent through these websites if you don't live where you're renting. but go on Airbnb and see if you can find a rental.
In a way, there's a longer tradition of it in Europe than there is in the United States. I mean, for decades and decades, people Eurailing around on these passes on the trains, stop and there's someone there waiting at the station. You want to stay at my place, kind of a thing.
Is there a city New Orleans can model after? Is there a city that our city's looking to say, well, they're doing it right in wherever, let's try to do it like...
Yes, so the way this process got started was the City Planning Commission conducted a short-term rental study, and so they looked at cities like New York, Portland, Austin. They're different variations, but they're all pretty similar. So you making either completely banning whole home rentals or making the process to allow that, really restricting the number of whole home rentals and that sort of thing.
Okay. Let's move on. David, you've looked at a bizarre story out of Terrebonne Parish where a sheriff was being criticized, which wasn't unusual, but he was being criticized online and actually sent deputies to the home of the person who they suspected was doing the criticizing online.
That's right.
And that raises all sorts of legal questions.
Well, and this was after multiple search warrants to get information from Facebook, to get IP addresses from the service provider AT&T, and then tracing this to a specific house, which turned out to be the home of a Houma police officer, and who says that he doesn't have anything to do with the creation of this website, which is called Exposedat. And on this website, Exposedat, it has a whole web of connections between top officials in Terrebonne Parish, including the DA, Joe Waits, the parish president, Gordy Dove, and the sheriff, Jerry Larpenter. And it all kind of seems to stem from an insurance agent whose company has the brokerage contract with the sheriff's office, and his company has also just been hired to have that same type of agency process the brokerage deal for the parish government as well. And he has businesses that he's owned with the parish president, Gordon Dove. So there's all these things that are definitely of interest to the public. And there's this person commenting anonymously online. There's also a Facebook page called the John Turner Facebook page. That's a fictitious name. So the sheriff decided, and his wife is involved. The sheriff's wife is involved. And the sheriff's wife works for this insurance agent. And so the suggestion is that he shouldn't be able to have the contract, this insurance agent shouldn't be able to have the contract with the sheriff's office. He says, it's not my company, it's my partner's company. So there's all of this back and forth, but the kind of upshot of it is that people were very upset to find out that they would do this raid at this house specifically because they were trying to unmask who this blogger was. And they were going to charge a crime, criminal defamation, which is a whole other can of worms, because defamation, we all kind of know about defamation as a civil thing. You defame me, I'm going to take you to court and we're going to fight it out and try to, settle it for money damages. This is a case where the sheriff is going in with a warrant that says criminal defamation, something that when it deals with public affairs and public servants has been found unconstitutional both by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Louisiana Supreme Court.
And the fact is, when you're a public official, you don't have much protection in terms of defamation that you're out there.
And of course, all of these public officials have said to me, we're allowed to just be raked over the coals with lies? That's not fair. We should be able to protect ourselves against defamation. And yes, they can, but there are different standards for public officials, and you have to show that someone has wanton disregard for the facts and had intent to defame you and damage you with knowledge that it's not true. And all of this stuff is dealing with public money and public contracts. And that is totally in the free discourse realm. And we've heard from various experts, legal experts, that that's the case. And Dane Ciolino, who's a highly respected ethicist, said essentially, what is this, Iraq? You know, I mean, we were really taken aback. And when we heard about the raid, we went down there, Katie Moore and I from Channel 4, and did a series of stories kind of laying out what the issue was and the fact that they had done this. And people in the parish are pretty upset about it, and they're starting to speak out after saying that they were really afraid for a long time to say anything.
Well, Ramon, all this would be enough to send some people drinking, okay? And if they go in Jefferson Parish, they might find a few fewer places, at least for a week, because there were some investigations, some raids this past week about bars serving underage.
Yeah, the parish, through it has a cooperative endeavor agreement with a group called the Human Services Authority of Jefferson, and I guess that group got a grant that then was some grant money, which was then used by the sheriff's office to, I guess, conduct some sting, I guess a sting operation. They'd send in an underage deputy, from my understanding, and that person would ask for a drink, and sometimes they'd get carded even, and the server would look at the ID, I guess not add up that the person was under 21, and then serve them anyway. So I think the businesses, once the story came out and once it got some attention at the parish council meeting on Wednesday, which was when the suspensions were imposed by the council. Obviously, after, I don't think anybody at the meeting who was affected by this was for underage drinking or talking, disputing, how underage drinking.
And some of these are pretty respectable places. These weren't.
Yeah, you're talking about some popular places. Zia being one of them. Arno's, in Bucktown, which is my friends and family love that place as well. So.
And that's R-N-O's.
Yes, R-N-O's. Yes,
okay.
Correct. And I don't think anybody was arguing for underage drinking. I just think that some of the businesses were asking for understanding that for some business considerations, and I think the parish council, the bulk of the people are going to serve it starting Monday. Some people were given a little bit of a reprieve till the Labor Day weekend, asking that for whatever reason. It's slow. It's slow right now, and the alcohol sales really kind of get me through it, or it's busy right now, and I'd like to kind of like capitalize it. And it seems that they were pretty open-minded to that. At the same time, I think, and they acknowledge that officials acknowledge that they've heard complaints that isn't there something more important to focus on, especially because that they're sending in a deputy, and in some of these places, I think the argument being made that there's a pretty upscale wine bar that the chances of an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid kind of sneaking in to get a drink there is pretty low, is one of the arguments. I think the officials acknowledge that, but still insist that they're getting grant money to do this. You're not taking resources away from other enforcement areas, and it's important to stay engaged in that area if you want to make an argument to keep drunk driving rates as low as possible, alcoholism rates as low as possible. Okay,
well, if you listen to the news this week, some people either thought might have to take the canoe to get to a bar. All this week we've been warned about possible flooding. You've been looking into this, what's called SELA,
right,
which is Southeast Louisiana, flood protection. What is the status of flood protection in the area?
Well, the status is drive around uptown and it's not done yet. You still can't get most places from here to there. But the construction along Napoleon Avenue is actually 95% complete. Along Claiborne Avenue, it's 90% complete. Along Jefferson, it's 75% complete. Should be finished by the middle of next year. So those other two will be finished before that. And then Louisiana Avenue, not done until 2018. And the last one in that whole project is Florida Avenue, and that's only about 30% complete. And this is, we've talked about these projects over and over again, but they're putting in those big box culverts under these roads that are big concrete tunnels, for lack of a better word, that you could drive a bus through. And the idea is, in heavy rains, like we've seen in the past, instead of the water standing on the street and waiting its turn to get pumped to either the lake or the river, it goes below the street into these box culverts and then gets pumped out in a specific order. All the projects will be tied together once they're done. So right now, we shouldn't really see an improvement to drainage during construction. The Army Corps of Engineers and the Sewerage and Water Board, their plans all along have been for drainage to be the same as it was, if not better, during construction. And they're saying that Army Corps of Engineers said north of Claiborne Avenue, up in the uptown area, it actually is better. In areas where it was wet and standing before, even though the systems aren't all tied in yet, it is already appearing to be better. We've seen major flooding on the North Shore and that sort of thing this week. Down here in New Orleans, they're standing puddles, but there haven't been canoes or pirogues rowing down the street this week at all.
And
in
there are
past
some
storms, we
people
would
in the
have
North
seen
Shore
that.
who live right next to little rivers and who live in swampy areas, and so
Right.
you'd expect that to happen.
Another part of this whole project is the Pump to the River campaign, and that is in the Elmwood and Harahan area, where instead of the water going 5 miles to the river, or 5 miles to the lake, it will be pumped 2 miles to the river instead. That project is about 90% complete. They're saying between 12 to 18 months, residents in the Harahan, Elmwood, and Uptown areas will see major improvement in drainage. Because all these projects are getting tied in and almost done. There's a huge reminder as we're seeing this much rain, though, and that is to clean the catch basins, because if the water can't get into the system, it can't get pumped out. If the water's held up on your street because there are leaves or trash or other things blocking the catch basin, the water's not getting into any of the tunnels underground and can't get pumped out and just backs up on the street. So
We saw that in Hurricane Isaac in Algiers with some major problems with some of the leading into the pump stations.
right. And they do say this should be the last Mardi Gras. Maybe we might have one more Mardi Gras where the neutral grounds are kind of under construction and aren't totally clear for parade goers to watch. Should happen one more time, and then all of this work, and this project at least, will be finished. There are major street resurfacing programs that are going to kick off kind of as soon as this all ends, so it will seem like we're still under construction, but the Sela project will be wrapping up, and the drainage should be vastly improved from what it was. This has been a nightmare project for a lot of homeowners, though. There are dozens of lawsuits that have been. That's all being handled through the Sewage and Water Board, not through the Army Corps of Engineers. And we'll see where all that stands. It's a story for another day.
Well, and Catherine, out in eastern New Orleans, there's a plot of land that was once known for having an amusement park, originally called Jazzland, and then Six Flags, neither of which survived, neither of which is well. And the big question has been what to do with the land. There with an appraisal on the value of the land that went on this week. What did you find out?
Well, so the Industrial Development Board, it's an economic development arm of the city. They've owned the old Six Flags site since 2009, and they haven't had any luck developing it. Particularly in the last, there was a plan to put an outlet mall out there, but it fell through when the Riverwalk got redeveloped. The developers decided that they didn't have the market anymore. So basically since 2012, they've been paying to get the grass cut, trying to maintain it, renting it out to some movie crews, which got them some income for a little while. But the board's pretty frustrated that they don't know what to do with it, so they decided to move forward with possibly selling it or auctioning it off. And the first step in that was, well, we don't even know how much it's worth. So they went out and got this appraisal. It came back this week at just over $3 million.
That's not much.
No. If you look at the assessor's website, it's over $50 million is the assessed value.
So the assessor says 50 and the appraiser says 3.
Right.
Okay.
And
So at what level have the owners been paying tax since 2009?
right. Well, the thing is, they thought maybe they could get some money from the old, all the old roller coasters and rides and things are still out there. They thought they could get some money from that, and the assessor came back and said, actually, it costs more to remove it than it could even be worth. So it ended up being $1 million subtraction from the value of the land to arrive at that $3 million or so. The roller coasters themselves, the assessor says these are not going to be used by anyone else. They're just too unsafe.
This is just, it's been such a terrible albatross for the city for so long. It was wrapped up with the whole Ray Nagin case with the Six Flags property, trying to redevelop that, and some of these folks who were involved in the bribery scandal. And it just seems like we can't get rid of this thing.
There was once a plan to put some sort of a multiple, like softball type of facility.
Sports complex.
Up there, but it doesn't seem like anything's happening.
Well, there are two groups that come to every industrial development board meeting almost. They each are proposing to bring back an amusement park to varying degrees. And the board just keeps saying, you're not showing us that you have credible financing, so we just can't move forward with you.
And people in New Orleans East are so frustrated because you've got the plaza, which has just sat completely barren. You've got that movie theater saying now finally it looks decent because of the graffiti that looks nice, and there's a artistic graffiti now instead of just tags. And then the Six Flags side, and it just, people out there feel like they've just been left out.
And I've always said to draw the population, there's two psychological barriers. There's the high rise on one end, and then there's that 6 Mile bridge on the other side. And so,
Right.
Other than the people who live between those things, it's kind of hard to want to draw people into that area. Ramon, Jefferson Parish took action this week trying to establish, for lack of a better term, what they call a czar or some kind of coastal management person to try to raise money to resolve the wetlands issues.
Sure. The person's role, more than anything, you've got a couple of streams of funding that are going to be, opening up soon. One of them being the subsidies related to the legislation for oil and gas production offshore. That's going to be split, I guess, among several people. And Jefferson being its size, I mean, the second largest parish, it hits the coast for sure. And so the idea is to bring in somebody that would focus and, I guess, advocate, lobby, fight, whatever, at all levels that money has to go through before it starts getting to the local level to make sure that as the person who proposed this position, Chris Roberts, the Jefferson Parish councilman, one of the at-large ones, said it's their fair share. And obviously that has a lot to do with which is Jefferson's size, which in itself sometimes I think creates a debate, because obviously the bulk of Jefferson's population is not at the coast. It's higher up, but at the same time, obviously Jefferson and a lot of people that even live further north of the coast depend on the coast to make their living, and certainly have property down there. And another stream coming in is money from the settlement that was finalized last year with BP over the 2010 oil spill. They set aside a generous portion of it to invest in coastal restoration and protection, and separate from that, I mean, the idea of taking those funds and doubling them, tripling them through matching grants at state and federal level. So this is all going to be kind of coming up, and instead of, I think, trying to mix it in with another department or with another position and adding that to someone else's plate, the idea is to have somebody that is focused on doing that. And so he spoke to Parish President Mike Yenny shortly after the proposal was approved for this person. It's going to be up to his administration to hire to find someone to hire that person. Okay. And at best case scenario, talking about 2 months from now, about 3 months, but it could be a little bit longer.
Okay, so there's a plan and a strategy. So
yes, I mean, I don't know how well thought out it is at this point. The idea is to get someone in and then have that person start also developing long-term plans toward the coast on top of the different funding opportunities I mentioned.
Well, David, when you first started reporting on Irvin Mayfield last year, at first it looked like a young musician who may have had some kind of discretion or something, but man, it's like an onion. I mean, it keeps on peeling into layer after layer. So you want to kind of catch us up on where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, I've done maybe 16, 17 stories on this over a year and a half almost, and the thing that brought it up again last week is that Bob Brown, the head of the Library Foundation, finally released a report, an internal investigation report by attorneys that the foundation hired after Mayfield and his business partner and all of the old guard had resigned and a new board came in last year, after I exposed the $1 million or so that they had directed from the Library Foundation to the jazz orchestra that paid their salaries. So, you know, about a month ago, I guess it was, that Mayfield stepped down from the jazz orchestra as well, after I had done some stories about a trip to New York City that was clearly not for library business, and a trumpet that he had purchased with money from library donations. And so there was maybe more pressure to really just break ties with him. And then I think people who have been at the center of this have kind of gradually come along to seeing, you know, we're not here to protect people's reputations. We're here to get this taken care of and get the library back on track to raising money, because this has really hurt fundraising terribly. People don't want to give money to the libraries because they feel like they know about the story and they feel like they can't trust that it's going to be used appropriately. So this report from September that was finally released last week laid out in great detail mostly the stuff that I've already reported, but some new stuff as well. The fact that he had used another nonprofit board that he sat on that was run by Jim Bernazzani, the former FBI director, called the Youth Rescue Initiative, and had an account there called the Irvin account. And the money went from the Library Foundation, from library donations from the public, to this other nonprofit, and then funneled from that to the jazz orchestra. And so, you know, that was another bit of details. I was able to get some additional details about travel beyond just the trip to the Ritz in New York and the Trumpet, but also air travel and hotel stays totaling $133,000 in just 2 years. So there was nothing there where the Library Foundation felt they could recover that money, because they said that Bob Brown said there were no specific rules against it, and we couldn't prove that all that other spending beyond the Ritz trip was for anything other than library. It might have been for proper library uses, but it was just so extravagant. You know, $133,000. And he's going to Ritz-Carltons all over the country. So
what was the cost of the famous breakfast at the Ritz-Carlton?
that was $1,400.
$1,400. That's a nice breakfast. Right?
Yeah.
Well, we're at the time of the show here where we need to kind of look ahead. Ramon, anything we should be aware of? Or?
Yeah, the Jefferson Parish Public School Superintendent Isaac Joseph had his first 18 months in office is almost up. In that time, saw some minor, a slight increase in standardized testing score. He gets a little more time in his role and see if he can do some of accomplish some of the objectives that he set out for himself.
Okay, David.
The Terrebonne Parish President has asked the Attorney General to look at the contracts with the insurance agency that I've been reporting about, that we talked about earlier, and we're supposed to hear about that coming up because there'll be a public meeting on August 24th, and we'll be there.
Dawn?
We're about halfway through something called Museum Month. It's a real good deal to take advantage of if you're a member of almost any museum in the New Orleans area. You can use your membership from that museum to get 2 people into any of the other museums, the World War II Museum, NOMA, that sort of thing. It's a good thing to take advantage of in the hot and the rain.
Catherine?
Well, the City Planning Commission's vote this week on short-term rentals was only a recommendation to the City Council. So this is going to return to City Council within 60 days for another public hearing, and so this debate has not ended yet.
And it has happened before that City Planning Commission has recommended one way and the City Council goes another way.
Absolutely.
But in this case, the City Planning Commission, the vote was unanimous. I guess that says something. So, yeah. Real quickly, David, you mentioned the agency, Mr. Bertazzani, former FBI. Have you talked to him? Is he?
I have talked to him. You know, I talked to him when I first reported on that a couple months ago, and he said, let the FBI investigation play out, because there is a federal criminal investigation on this. Let it play out, and you'll see there's nothing there. When I called him about the very specific accusations in this report last week, he hung up on me.
Okay. We'll follow up on that. Okay. Well, thanks to all of you. Thank you. Great job. Thanks to all of you for watching. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.